Hello my wonderful visionaries, welcome to the channel. Today we are checking out Voltaire, the vegan vampire. I've put around 3 hours or so into the early access build. Those who know me know I love a good vegetable, but dietary requirements aside, Voltaire is a young vegan vampire shunned by his meat-eating family. You are thrown into the world to fend for yourself, growing food to stave off hunger. Then at night, ghouls attack and you have to defend your garden and your house from the invasion. So straight away, the art style is charming and frankly pretty cute. You have Frankenstein, your uncles that give you quests via Carrier Crow. These are all you're going to get in terms of narrative. These messages, they grant you XP. As you level up, you can pick one of 3 powerful upgrades ranging from, shooting projectiles, lowering your cooldowns on your abilities, or even pets that circle your character and attack enemies at a whim. My initial thoughts going into this game was that it's a farming sim and a tower defense game with plants. The Plants vs Zombies and Don't Starve parallels are stark. The game definitely does fall short of the mark in both departments, and I'm gonna explain why. The plants are split into 2 groups. Ones that give you food, ones that aid in defending, your patch and the house. These vary from ranged, melee, even like ranged units that can slow down opponents. You do get a scarecrow as well that can, ward off enemies. This was in principle pretty interesting, but the issue I found is that the need to experiment just didn't exist. Ranged units just seemed way too powerful. Each plant essentially has a bonus, and so if you stack together plants that get bonuses and they're ranged, they can mow down, a lot, really. At least 3 of these biomes that I explored, the patches of grass that you can plant on is fixed. So there really isn't much variation in terms of strategy, and these can be a bit of a distance away from the house that you need to protect. So there isn't really any bandwidth to be creative or really try and find any plant combinations that could work. It's so far quite brute force in terms of getting through each level. So the aim of the game is to get through an entire week, and then on the 7th day you get a boss battle, and each day you're being invaded by ghouls and they get progressively harder. Then you have a boss fight, and then once that day's over you move over to your next biome. The issue I found is that the scenarios don't change. The environments change and some of the requirements change. For example, in a barren location it might take twice as much water to grow your plants, but that is pretty much it. They tend to be slight tweaks and variations on already established mechanics. They don't really switch the gameplay up in any real kind of meaningful way that really gets your brain working in that regard. When beating a boss, you acquire soul stones that you can spend to get permanent upgrades, which is super useful. These range from getting more XP, starting the day off with less hunger, that kind of thing. Each action requires hunger, so if you're cleaning up your lot, if you're planting seeds, if you're watering plants, all of this costs hunger. Now, one of the things that really did frustrate me about the game is when collecting water, you actually have to chase the droplets. Now, initially this was quite cute and it was quite interesting, but became very, very, very tedious after putting in, an hour and a half. It just was not a good design choice, because water is so important, especially if you go, like I mentioned, you go into an arid biome where you need double the water. It's a real hassle. Now, there is an option to be able to build a well, and at the start of the day, the well gives you water straight away, and you can upgrade that ability so that the well in the morning gives you more water, but that requires quite a lot of resources, and the well stays in that biome. So after the 7 days are up, the well is no longer useful. You move to a brand new location and start again. So you're putting like an investment of resources into something that's going to help you, which fundamentally meant that when I was in the biome that I was in, I might be coming to the end of the week and I might think to myself, well, I don't want to invest any more resources in this biome, because if I beat this boss at the end of the week, then all of that's going to be lost. And that actually happened, where on like day 6 I built a well to get water, and then beat the boss, and had used up all those resources, was in a brand new biome that had a well, and I could have just used those resources for the new biome. So yeah, it wasn't really ideal. There was definitely some teething problems here. Again, this game is early access, so there are going to be some balancing tweaks that need to be taken into consideration. But chasing the water around when you don't build a well is not fun at all. Speaking of balancing, I boosted the crowberry skill, and it absolutely broke the game economy. So there's a berry that you can harvest in the game that costs no hunger to harvest, and every day these bushes refresh. I upgraded these, so instead of improving your hunger by like 1 or 2 points, it increased it by 7, and you can harvest 10 to 12 berries a day, so you can essentially keep your hunger at bay, which eventually makes growing the other plants that give you food obsolete. They just become a fail-safe bonus. Definitely something that needs to be fixed. By the time day 7 arrived, I just had all these berries, and I just decided, you know what, I'm not going to bother growing anything. I'm just going to get my offensive berries to protect everything up and ready, and it just made the bosses way too easy. I think this is where we hit on the fundamental issue with the tower defense aspect, is that there really isn't too much depth here. Like I said, your spaces are fixed, the plants are interesting, but if we're trying to compare it to something like Plants vs Zombies, it really does fall short. Plants vs Zombies has curated scenarios and a wide array of zombie types, so it really did help to mix it up. There just isn't that here. It's quite disappointing. It didn't really feel like the choices that I made really mattered. You can pretty much brute force the game, and that's the biggest issue with the tower defense side of things. When we move on to the farming sim side of things, again, we aren't having as much luck. Games like Stardew Valley and Don't Starve give you a proverbial carrot on the stick to chase, like a new section of map to explore, a new schematic to work on, but this carrot just isn't there. There isn't any long-term goal, which really hurts this aspect of the game. You're merely just farming to save hunger and protect the house, but those berries completely make this side of things obsolete. The easy boss battles aren't really a drive to keep you playing. In those games, you might get a schematic for a new item, or you might enrich your relationship with an NPC or something, but there just isn't anything like that here. You are staving off hunger enough just to fight this boss, and for me it just really wasn't enough. After the second boss, I was like, I can't do this for a third or a fourth boss. Now, something that they could add to the game would be like a permanent garden that you can always go back to, more NPCs that you can interact with. You need something other than just surviving to see a boss to drive you. That just isn't there currently. Now, I think there is a husk of something charming here. The principle is really quite interesting, like harvesting to prepare for a tower defense. That idea is solid, and I think that can be built upon to make something that's really compelling. But at the moment, the tower defense side of things is underbaked. The farming sim only facilitates the survival of your character, and inevitably it falls short from hitting the mark. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this game. I think for a couple of hours it's a lot of fun, actually. I played about 3 hours of the game, and 2 hours of it I enjoyed, and then as I started to get into the third hour, I was like, I don't want to do this. I didn't want to see any of the later bosses, for that matter. So yeah, unfortunately, it's difficult to recommend this one until they sharpen up. It just seems like baby's first tower defense and baby's first farming sim smashed into one. Definitely lacking a little bit of depth, but like I said, something that they could add before the 1.0 release. So those are my thoughts. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.